I love Bronnie Ware's work, who wrote The 5 Regrets of the Dying. It's really important, these 5 regrets. I wish I worked less. I wish I spent more time or more effort with my friends. I wish I lived the life according to my own dreams and not that of others. I wish I had more adventures. I think even having those 5 listed is really important to deepen our relationship to our humanness. That's what we're lacking.
Do you ever feel like you never have enough time to keep on top of things? In this episode, we discuss how to use boundaries as a tool for time management to gain control over your life and avoid burnout. Welcome to Move Your Mind, where we uncover why you are holding yourself back from getting the life you want and what to do about it. With the help from high-achieving guests and experts in behavioural science, personal development, and the health and wellness space. Join us if you're ready to move out of your own way toward your ideal self. I'm your host, Nick Brax, and I've been working in the health and wellness space for the last 15 years, helping people find direction and gain the courage to take control of their life. My mission is simple: to help you learn everything that I wish I knew so you can become your ideal self. Lacking guidance, I spent the majority of my youth feeling lost and disempowered, which led to depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, and substance abuse. Looking back, I didn't have the vocabulary to communicate what I was experiencing. And as a man, I didn't resonate with the emotional language used in traditional therapy. I didn't need to talk about my feelings. I needed tangible solutions to guide me toward building a life I was proud of. If you can relate, then this podcast is for you. Setting boundaries is one of the most important things you can do to give yourself back that time. Today I have Dr Michelle Woodhouse joining me. She's a medical doctor and is sharing how to develop stronger boundaries and other practical tools that can help to avoid burnout. If you're ready to take action and build a stronger mindset, then keep listening. Michelle, thank you so much for making the time to have this chat.
Oh, thanks for having me on the show, Nick. Good to see you again.
Yeah, you too, and really excited to talk to you after being on your podcast, and really enjoyed that chat. Love all the work you're doing. I think there's so many different topics we can touch on, probably not enough to fit into, one episode. But yeah, really excited to explore quite a few things, especially burnout, how we can, try and find balance in running our own business and manage, all these different things that are really difficult to manage in, the world we live in at the moment, where it's 24/7.
It is. It's a challenge, and it's a daily challenge. So yeah, I'm excited.
So before we get into it, for our listeners, would you be able to give a background on yourself and the work you're doing, and essentially how you came to be doing what you're doing today?
Yeah. So my background is I'm a holistic GP. So after medical school, probably that was when I experienced my first burnout, but I actually didn't know that was a thing back then, essentially. And so medical school was incredibly challenging and toxic, really, to be fair. And so I ended up struggling within the first couple of years of working as a junior doctor. And I found myself working in the HIV ward at a busy inner city hospital in Melbourne in kind of the mid-90s. And so that was really at a very heightened sort of stage of the HIV and AIDS epidemic. And it was very challenging as a young girl, really. Like, I felt like a girl having to diagnose really young mainly men, dying from this really devastating and very confusing, very confronting kind of illness, and developed quite a lot of anxiety and couldn't sleep, and wound up at a meditation retreat in Byron Bay, which I can, safely say changed my life and my relationship to meditation. I didn't know it was a meditation retreat. It was called Find Your Natural Voice. I thought it was a singing retreat. But it was covertly a meditation retreat. Anyway, I found, I think I cried for the first 3 days and didn't realize how much stored emotion I had in me. And then, to cut a long story short, that just led me on a journey into integrative and holistic medicine. And really, I ended up doing a mind-body medicine postgraduate degree and worked really passionately as an integrative GP for 20 odd years and ran my business and really successful business down on the Mornington Peninsula, and we had, at the peak of it, about 18 staff, and really happy, beautiful business. But along the way, so many challenging things happened. At one stage, 2 of my main doctors left within a month of each other, one to travel and one to have babies, and so that was like losing sort of 75% of the business overnight. And at the time, when a new manager had come on and she was defrauding me, and I was building a new building and a new centre that was bigger, and so it was then the pressure just started, and it just didn't really stop, and I got myself burnt out for probably the 5th time. Ended up selling the business, which was, is a challenge for anyone that's ever sold a business. It's very rare to have a successful business in the first place, but it's even rarer to get one to sell. And so then after I sold it, I really, truly crashed, and really, I wanted to really reinvent myself. I think my heart had changed and my direction had changed, and general practice was no longer something that felt really alive to me. And so I wrote a book. I wrote a book on all of my experience in terms of a really holistic approach to anxiety, burnout, and stress, because I felt that there was something missing in the conversation, and people would come to me with like anxiety, for example, and really think there's something wrong with them. Like, that's just me. I'm the anxious type, and I've got anxiety, like it was something they picked up at a really bad supermarket 25 years ago and never ever got rid of it. It's the same with depression. I got depression, and it was funny, like in an hour-long appointment, I couldn't really, sort of address those things. So, I mean, to be honest, Nick, over the last 2 years, I've completely changed my existence, so I work as a medical director for an online startup called Vivally. I've written my book. I'm running, holistic integrative retreats with a colleague of mine internationally, and so I'm having lots of fun.
I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, amazing story, and thank you for sharing that. And I love the fact that it sounds like you've got that mindset where you're willing to reinvent yourself, you're willing to throw yourself into things, you're willing to, face uncertainty, I guess, which, and a lot of this show is about that. How can we give people advice when they're going on that journey? And, I guess there's uncertainty in everything, but just
Absolutely.
dealing with the unknowns of whatever path we're currently going down.
Yeah.
So
I love that question, and I love that because, what I wouldn't like your listeners to think was that it was easy, that I'm really good at facing uncertainty. And I have to say, over the last kind of, 4 years of my life has probably been some of the hardest challenges I've ever faced. And there's 2 things that I'd love to kind of say to that is so when I did sell the business, and this is a conversation that's really not spoken about very often, and I'm in a very privileged position to be able to say that, but sometimes in life, when life presents to you the opportunity to follow a dream, it's very difficult to do that, because most of our life, and my life was certainly like that, is us chasing the carrot. Like, I always had some future kind of dream to chase after. And I'm sure that you experience this, but you speak to most people and like, how are you? And it's like, I'm getting there, or I've got a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan, or, they're waiting for retirement or waiting for the next big job or waiting for the thing, the next iteration. And there's something really inherently human about having something to chase after, because in some ways our biology is actually made like that. We need that dopamine surge and that sense of not enoughness to help us to strive to get what we need to sort of do. But one of the biggest challenges that I like, and it was so unknown to me, is when I got to a situation that I had enough money, and it wasn't a huge amount of money, but it was enough for us. I don't spend very much, but to kind of go, you can fulfill your dream now of writing this book. And I can tell you it's a really full-on experience, because then so much doubt comes in, and then you're like, do I really want it? Like, is this something that really fills me up? And so all of this doubt kind of comes in, and it was quite extraordinary. And I love this sort of playing with the unknown. Like, I really wanted to change my life. Like, I had this sense of me, like, I want adventure again in my life, and you're younger than me, and when I was probably your age, like, life felt so much more adventurous. And when I've got an 18-year-old, so I've been a mother for 18 and a half years, and as much as that's an adventure in itself, it also stops the kind of wild adventuring too. And so there was this really, I guess, a deeper force that I needed to listen to. And, the combination of those kind of things, and then the safety and security was gone, so I didn't have an income anymore.
Yeah.
And so then it was a really an alive feeling, because I didn't have safety and security anymore, but I also had this opportunity to kind of, come on, put your money where your mouth is kind of experience. And facing uncertainty was something I really needed to do. But the other thing that's really, I think, very misunderstood is that you often have to close the door of the past before the new doors open. And that's the scary thing. I knew I was on a precipice, and I kind of wanted to be, but I was really scared too. Like, it took years and lots of encouragement and lots of courage and lots of will, and lots of processing to get me over the line. So, for your listeners too, it's not an easy process. It looks easy on paper. It sounds easy when you listen to kind of motivational podcasts and stuff like that. But the doing of it is far harder than the reading of the inspirational poems or stories that you hear. So
Absolutely. No, that's so interesting what you're sharing there, and it really is, and it's about accepting that daily grind, really, and that things are going to be up and down. And even if it is doing your dream thing, we can often sort of be discouraged when we follow our dream and really go on that pursuit, because even that dream project or dream career is not going to be glamorous all day, every day, and it might even take away from some of that thing that we loved about it. So exactly like you're saying, it's about really being honest with yourself about whatever the hell we do, there's going to be difficulties day to day.
Yeah.
So what are you willing to live with daily, and how are you going to approach that and check in with yourself and make sure that you're following, a path that you're able to commit to.
And I thought about our conversation last time on my podcast about you and your, that you're highly passionate person, so you used to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and do 100 extra push-ups, which I thought was extraordinary. But I mean, I guess what it got me thinking is that I am a highly passionate person and always have been. Thinking about me as a little kid, like, you really curious kid. Like, I think, my first Christmas present I asked for was a chemistry set. Like, just I was one of those kids, And but I think there's a shadow side to every aspect of ourselves. So there's a shadow side to passion, which is basically, that's what burnout is that it's the passionate, enthusiastic people that are getting burnt out. And there's a reason for that. Is everybody loves passionate, enthusiastic people. I mean, if you're a passionate, enthusiastic person, you're the one that's going to be asked to be on the team, to do the extra delivery, to stay a little bit later, to take up the extra challenge. I mean, I'd ask the most passionate and curious and enthusiastic person on my team to do something extra. And so our job is actually to say no. Our job is to actually learn a boundary, because what would happen if I asked somebody, the most passionate person, they said, no, I can't do that because of my capacity. I'd go and ask the next person. And that's just human nature. So I think it's really important that we understand human nature and we stop taking things so personally. So the more that we can actually understand our humanness and our biology and our neurology and how we're actually made to work, the less we have to take personally, and less we have to get enmeshed in that emotional confusion. It makes such a massive difference, I think, because when you're a passionate person, you're always going to be a passionate person. So now I've flipped into new passions.
Yes.
And I was just saying to you before the show, like I've been sick for the last couple of weeks, and I was like, oh my God, Michelle, you're doing it again. Because I just love life and I love taking on new things, and finding balance for me is a real challenge. It's a
Yes,
real
and I can
challenge.
obviously relate to you in that. And before we started recording, was telling you how I'm sort of on the verge of, not quite burnout, but pretty worn out from just going around the clock at the moment. And it really is what you're saying there. I think it's so important that if you are that passionate person, reminding yourself that you can do all of these different things. And I love how you were talking about, you wanted to write your book, but you were doing your business, and then that was sort of, you could immerse yourself in that after. And it takes, I think, life experience to get to that point where you realize that you need to have patience to do one thing properly at a time. You need to
Yes.
have those boundaries. If you're a people pleaser, if you're bad with boundaries with yourself and you want to do everything, you'll end up actually shooting yourself in the foot, because unless you've got all the resource in the world, how can you do all of these different things properly at once? We only have so much bandwidth. It's a really difficult thing to deal with.
I remember I wrote about this in the book. I remember being a kid, and um, we used to sort of talk about, the seven wonders of the world and the seven virtues and the seven deadly sins and stuff. And one of the seven virtues was patience. And I remember thinking as a kid, going, why would patience be a virtue? Like, that's ridiculous. Like, it's just stupid. And I remember learning about the virtue of patience while I was selling the business, and
Hmm.
it really is like life has a flow, and so we can either kind of go too fast through life and end up needing to kind of rest, or we can go with the flow where we need to have times where we accelerate and times where we rest. So I think as a society, like, we can talk about epidemics of of obesity, and we can talk about epidemics of mental health, but we have an epidemic of no rest. Like, we
Yeah.
don't know as a society how to rest anymore. Like, our weekends are not restful. They're often like, parenting is full of children's sports and after hours kind of events and social kind of catch it ups. Like, it's very rare to sit and mindfully rest. I mean, then there's Netflix and binging TV things and whatever, which isn't akin to rest. It's not good quality rest. And so we have an epidemic of we're very poor at leisure time as a community. And
Yeah.
it takes a lot to get it back, because when you talk about the nervous system is geared to adapt. And so what happens with burnout, for example, or, if you're a passionate, curious, you know, person, is that your whole nervous system is going to adapt to that. So after I
Hmm.
sold the business, I could feel my brain going back into strategy, thinking, navigating, forward planning. It was like it was addicted to it. And it took at least 6 months for that to settle down. But interestingly, as I start to gear up again, those pathways are still, they're kind of just behind the wing, and they're ready to
Yeah.
kind of launch again. And so I can very easily go back into that strategy thinking kind of mindset. And so if we understand that it takes years to really unravel that. So as we lose our leisure time, it's actually a skill to get it back. And so no, I don't feel like many people are talking about how paramount this is. And that
Hmm.
slow time, we've lost slow time. We've lost
Yeah.
the waxing lyrical and wasting time, the joy of wasting time, of looking at clouds and, watching a little ant crawl up a piece of grass. Like, we've just we've lost boredom, and therefore
And
we've, yeah.
yeah, it's sad that, and like you're saying, I think there's not enough people talking about it because
Mm,
we're all so immersed in this world, and it's moved so fast and got to this point where we're just all addicted to so many different things that we don't realize. And we talk about drug addiction or alcohol or the traditional ones, but social media addiction,
Yeah.
addiction to work, addiction to whatever it is. I think
Mm.
I think it's almost unavoidable to be somewhat addicted to different things and
Yeah.
stimulation with what we're facing. But it is,
Absolutely.
yeah, we need to make that conscious effort uh, to have those boundaries, to set
Yeah.
aside that time, or you just won't, because it's so hard. It's so in your face.
And we're sort of kind of shamed for resting, when people are like, yeah, I'm just going to, work less and it's oh, lucky you, so
Yeah,
there's an added level of shame. It's very difficult to be the resting one in a society that is forever pressurized to pursue. So we are like the pursuers of more and more and more. And one of the things that I realized when I sold the business was that less is more. Like I could really,
yeah,
like, I'm so passionate about everything, but when I do too much, I don't enjoy even what I am passionate about. So I have to be really conscientious about making sure I don't do too much so that I can actually really enjoy what I do really enjoy. I'm lucky that I've got things that I enjoy and they actually pay an income. But when
yeah,
I do too much, I don't enjoy any of it. And
yeah,
so it's a really strong lesson. It sounds so easy, but the doing of it is actually really deeply challenging. And for example, like I think that was about 6 months ago, an Instagram post like talking about social media, but there was a woman that was kind of, I guess, chastised and sort of pulled down because basically her purpose of life was to seek joy. So every day she would just seek joy. And there was just like, oh, lucky for you, and so frivolous and meaningless. And I was like, whoa, where have we gone wrong? You know?
Hey guys, if you're enjoying this podcast, please click the subscribe button, leave a like or comment, share with your friends, and follow me on Instagram at NickBrax. I really appreciate your ongoing support.
You know?
It's exactly like if we're having that attitude towards it, and that's what the whole society is about. How do you just achieve the next thing? How do you
Mm,
make more money? And like you're saying, it's a treadmill that we can never get off. And it makes so much sense what you're saying there. And I face this in business, which I find really difficult because I love the cause of what I'm trying to do, and I love so many different things. But then business becomes, because of wanting to achieve in it, there are never ending things you can do all day, every day. So the
mm,
joy is very easy to lose because you just are trying to tick off things all day. So then how do you find that balance where you sort of can be um, productive with it, but then, like you're saying, also be finding actual being present and enjoying the process? Do you
yeah.
think that is possible to balance the two, like where you were talking about before with it took a long time for that strategic mind to unravel?
Mm,
Is it possible to train yourself to have the ability to be able to switch that on and be in business mode, but then switch it off and then go more into creative relaxation mode?
I think it's definitely possible, but I do think it takes effort. And I think that we assume that leisure shouldn't require any effort. And
Yes.
and our social life, so there's a whole new stream called social medicine, that our social life doesn't really require effort. But in fact, that's not really true. If we want a really healthy social life and a really healthy leisure life, it requires an equal amount of effort to pursue that as work life. And I think there's a misunderstanding that that's the easy part, and that when you
Mm,
rest, you just simply just don't do the active, working stuff. And so there's a misunderstanding or an incongruency there to totally. You have to be good at leisure, and it takes, if you've lost that skill, then it's going to take effort to get it back, because
yeah.
you have to go through boredom. And boredom for somebody that isn't a passionate person is a really difficult state of being to go through. And what
Mm,
happens is, because you've got this hyper-stimulated world, it's very easy to get distracted into the same addictions as what you mentioned, like scrolling and social media. So,
yeah.
it's a discipline about getting through anything, but I think it's a discipline that is probably has the most worthy outcome ultimately.
Yeah, because why are we doing anything if we can't enjoy the process or enjoy a bit of time out? You could
Yeah,
make all the money in the world, but where's the joy in life?
that's
It's
right.
kind of crazy.
Yeah. And I mean, I think there's a difference between like real contentment, joy, and hedonistic kind of pursuits of some hedonism too,
Yes.
because I think they get misconstrued as well. Because the hedonism, particularly, now that we've got this kind of hyper media sort of influence, requires money
Yeah.
often. And so then you're thinking, oh, well, I can't do that until I do this. It works. It kind of almost amplifies the kind of workaholism that I think our society is actually getting more and more and more into workaholism. And I don't think we're speaking about that enough either.
No, and it really is. And I've seen it sort of firsthand in New York. It's more elevated than a lot of places, and it's
Yeah.
almost hard to believe some of the sort of behavior you see from people. And I've got friends of friends that are in finance or in running tech startups where it's all about money, and exactly what you're saying there. It is, I am going to grind and I have to make this much money for these different hedonistic pursuits,
Mm,
and all of them are chasing the same thing. But then that's just a momentary thing. It's like taking a drug. Maybe it's fun for 5 seconds, but
mm,
that's not the thing that's going to actually fuel you. And
mm.
no one can sustain that. And it's just, yeah, so much of the world is wired in that way.
So much. And I think to understand, coming back to neurobiology, is what we do a lot of, we wire for. So the more that we do, the more that we wire. And to unwire or to rewire is kind of the new terminology. Is, we
Mm,
talk about unwinding, but we've lost that sort of skill. We have to unwire ourselves from, life, but we're kind of constantly wired. And this is the big issue. And I love Bronnie Ware's work, who wrote The
mm,
Five Regrets of the Dying. And I mean, it's really important, these five regrets. I'm not sure that I'm going to remember them, but I wish I worked less. I wish I spent more time or more effort with my friends. I wish I lived the life according to my own dreams and not that of others. I wish I had more adventures, I think. And I'm not quite sure on the
yeah,
fifth one, but anyway, go and buy her book.
yeah,
Or listen to some of her podcasts, because I think even having those five sort of listed is really important to deepen our relationship to our humanness. And that's what we're lacking, is we're lacking a
yeah,
relationship to our own hearts. And it's almost like we pretend that we don't have that. Like that we can just work and work and work and work and work. And, you see a lot of people build up their defenses. I don't need anybody else. I don't need friends. I don't need anybody to approve of my behavior. I don't need anything or anyone. I mean, that's a really challenging place to be. It's a very lonely place to be. And quite frankly, I don't believe them.
no, I don't think it's possible. We're all human, and
Exactly. We're
that's
wired for
yeah.
connection.
And the
Mm,
people that are saying that are normally the people that, have a drinking problem or are
mm,
overworking or doing whatever they're doing. So they're saying it because they're compensating in a different area. So and it's no one's fault. It's a societal thing. And like you're saying, with that unwiring thing, we've been wired in a certain way. So it's about how do we get to that place
mm.
to be able to make a decision and then put in the work to try and rewire things. And
Yeah.
do you think that's sort of what we're talking about here is one of the biggest reasons we have so much burnout? And yeah, I guess
Yeah.
like the other part is how do we go about trying to make changes to improve
Yeah.
burnout or more importantly prevent burnout?
Yeah. So I think we're wired for external validation. I think we're a culture that reveres external validation and striving and measurable elements of success, which is usually money, status, titles, and possessions. So
Yeah.
we can measure them. We're a reductionistic society, and we've been that way for probably about 10,000 years. And when you track back the roots to those kind of things, we came away from holistic elements of thinking even around the time of Plato and Aristotle. And so we changed our understanding from a holistic understanding, which also looked at not only tangible aspects of humanity, but the intangible, and they were of equal value. But of course, the intangible can't be measured. And so then we focused on the tangible, and we focused on the measures. And so you would have heard, if you can't measure it, you can't market it, or if you can't measure it, don't bother, or all of these kind of, buzz lines these kind of days. But we really need to refute all of that kind of thing, because there's elements, even in medicine too, we sort of hyper focus on things that we can measure. Now, we can measure a drug much more than we can measure a doctor-patient relationship. We can measure a drug compared to a social intervention program about loneliness, or men talking, as a group. And so the funding is going to go into the drug because it's easier to measure, versus the social medicine, which may have probably a much vaster, much more intangible, and much deeper healing impact. But it's so difficult to measure, so the funding doesn't get there. And I think as individuals, we just have to remind ourselves there's so much in us, in our humanity, that we can't measure. So we've got to stop thinking that measuring externally is the only source of validation that we're running towards. And until we do that, we've lost probably over 50% of our humanity, which is in the intangible. And I just think that it's unsustainable to be a human in that regard. And that's what is such a powerful impact of burnout, is it's a loss of a whole. There's a lassitude. It's like the whole nervous system is just had enough of working in one domain. But it's almost like the body calling you back and just saying, come on, honey. Nah, no
I can't
way.
do it anymore.
Sorry.
It's just
Sorry,
so
but not
crazy.
sorry.
Exactly. But it's
Yeah.
so crazy listening to what you're saying there, because I couldn't agree more. And, as humans, we need to be in communities, we need to connect, and all these things that they're all things that we all sort of understand and know that we should be doing, and they're available to everyone. Yet people are directing the attention to, like you're saying, to drugs, to other, alternatives. The world's geared in that way where there's solutions in front of us, and we don't actually have to really do anything that crazy to get access to that. We can all,
No.
with a much smaller effort and basically no resource, have that access to go and connect with someone, to go to a men's group, you can go to whatever it is and get a hit of the thing you really need. And the more you do that, you'll then be more likely to, re-look at your whole aspect on how you're running your life.
Unbelievable. I mean, it really is. I mean, that's why I think burnout is really exciting. Like,
yeah.
I mean, I just, often I'll reframe it for patients. It's like, there is nothing wrong with you for burning out. In fact, there's a lot right. I mean, you made it. Like, you actually got to the point where your body said no more. Your nervous system said, nah, you can't do this anymore. You can't do it that same way. You have to learn a different way to do it. And that's really, I mean, it's a little bit like anxiety too. It's like, this is the way our body talks to us. This is the wisdom of the body, and it just activates itself through body symptoms of fatigue or lack of productivity, or even negativity, that cynicism that comes out through burnout. And again, it kind of comes back to that. It's really important we don't take burnout personally. It's like, it's a good thing that the body reached a level. It's not a sign of weakness. It's not a vulnerability. I mean, it is a vulnerability. In fact, because we're all vulnerable, like, we're all just us. And
Everyone, yeah.
we're stronger when we're together, and we're stronger when we're in community and when we're in a sense of belonging, and that we've got that safety and trust between individuals. And so, but with burnout, the cynicism and the pulling away and the negativity is just a representation that we're not in connection. So it's really powerful way to learn the language of the body. And I, probably, I'm not sure, my patients might get annoyed with me, but I get a bit excited when they are burnt out and anxious, because I know that they've reached a level of discomfort that is going to help them reach motivation to be able to do things a new way. Because we need a certain level of discomfort and irritation and angst for us to change, because, as he said, it's pretty easy to take a pill. It's pretty easy to scroll social media. It's pretty easy to keep doing what we're doing if it's not too bad. And that's the way we're built.
And we need to get to that point where the pain of not changing outweighs the pain of changing. So then we actually do it. And yeah, like you said, when I started looking, anxiety's probably been the biggest thing for me. And when I started looking at it more like, hang on, a lot of these things that I'm feeling anxiety about are there. That's actually helpful, because my anxiety is telling me that I need to improve on this thing, or this, if I make a change here, or if I address this problem, maybe it might help. And then when I started doing that, it really dramatically improved it. But often we just ignore we don't want to address the reality of the situation, or it's confronting. We don't want to change. So we just push it aside, and then we get more anxiety. And like you're saying there, it doesn't change till we get to that point where we just have a breakdown.
And then I think the other really important thing to mention there is the shame. So one of the worst things about, say, something like anxiety, particularly for men, is that they feel ashamed of feeling fear or fear and anxiety. And I mean, women feel shame about it too, or they're shamed for, having heightened emotional fragility or whatever might be a case. And so I think that that's really important to acknowledge, because sometimes we layer our emotions over the top of the base emotions, and that can then keep the vicious cycle going. And so that's the other really powerful thing about shared humanity, is when we actually go and seek support and human support, and that person can really hold that condition and not tell you that you're broken, and not tell you that you've got a disease, because you don't. Anxiety is not a disease. It's not. No. It's a physiological state. And so, yes, it becomes a dysfunction if it's very, very overwhelming. But it's not a disease, and it's never been a disease, and it never will be. And it's really important that people understand that, because then what happens is they understand that they're not broken. They need new skills. It's a lack of skill. And so if we can teach people the skills, and it's a powerful change, rather than just go, you need a tablet. Now, not saying that taking medication is the wrong thing, because I've seen it be a powerful part of a treatment process. But to think that it's the only part of the treatment process, I think, is inherently flawed. Yes. And I think that but what the medications can do is give us an opportunity to lift some of the, I guess, the chaotic aspects of what can occur in those particular states, and then give the person more room in which to gain and gather some more practice with those skills that are required, going forward.
Absolutely. Yeah, because it's such a complicated area, and there's so many levels to what we need to do, and it's just taking that first step and identifying what are the things that I need to work on here. And like you're saying, medication might be part of that process, but one part in a range of steps to get moving forward in that area. What would you say to someone that is experiencing burnout and they're just at that breaking point? They don't know what to do. They don't know how to go on. They're just feeling stuck. What would you say would if anyone listening is in that
Mm.
position, as a first step, what could be a good approach?
I think the first thing is to seek help. I think there's nothing like really telling your story. And what I would encourage people to do is that, if they do have a relationship with a GP, fantastic, that can be a great opportunity. There's also counsellors and psychologists that, you can access with or without a GP referral. Or, there's probably some online kind of supports, or even a trusted friend, of really owning how you're experiencing. What I found with burnout is that it was difficult to find the words of what I was experiencing when I was experiencing it. So I kind of almost had a sort of dualistic feeling. Is sort of, I knew I was burnt out, but I sort of had to keep going. And I would watch myself kind of be exhausted. I used to have to count myself out of bed to get up. It's very unusual for me to have to do that. Be
Yeah.
like, okay, like I knew I was sighing a lot. I knew I was exhausted, but I had to kind of come to this particular finishing line. The other piece of advice that I would give is, what happens is sometimes we fixate on an idea of what the enoughness is. So, for example, like I had to sell the business. That was my sort of thing. And my husband was really supportive, and he's like, we don't have to sell the business. We could close the business. So seeing whether you can have some supportive person to give you different options in burnout can sometimes be really good, because when we're burnt out, the brain for new ideas is kind of in a frazzled state. So our thinking often isn't optimized. And particularly if you're the type of person that does tend to be a good thinking person, a good solution orientated person, to not have those skill set at that particular time can be really challenging. So speaking to people about your problems and seeing whether you can actually listen. So give yourself over that vulnerability and kind of like, okay, I'm in trouble here. I'm burnt out. And hear yourself speak, but also give other people the opportunity to support you. Because if I could ask you to acknowledge that you're not in top shape to make good decisions right now, and that it's really important to get a bit of a trusted team around you. Now, for those in business, it could be an accountant, it could be a solicitor, it could be a business coach, it could be somewhere along those kind of lines. But for those that sort of lack that inner circle, then health practitioners can also be a good first stop. Now, the other thing that I love to tell people is that most general practice clinics, you have the option to book a long consultation. Please don't book a standard consultation with a GP if you're experiencing this. Always book a double or a triple, whatever you can get. The longest possible appointment you can get with a GP is always better, because it gives them time to listen and you time to talk. And that can be a great first step.
Thank you for sharing that. I love all. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, well, I was going to say one thing is that one of the things that I'll often see online with burnout is, to make sure that you're doing relaxation exercises and maybe think about taking up a yoga class or, exercising, whatever. But in really true, deep burnout, it's about actually having less on your plate than more on your plate. Because when you're really burnt out and trying to get to 3 yoga classes a week and doing, 6 meditations a week, it sometimes can be too much. It's more actually a state that the nervous system has had enough and that rest is what is required. And it's the coming down. So I would lie languidly on the couch without Netflix on. I would lie on the grass and look at the clouds. I would, go and sit under a tree in a park and just rest. That would be another top tip in the early stages of burnout.
Well, because I can imagine for a lot of people that have got to that place because they are so productivity oriented, you could easily just turn yoga or exercise or whatever into the new that becomes the
You're
replacement.
totally onto it. Absolutely. No,
Yeah.
seriously. Like it just becomes another commodity that we strive for. And yoga's beautiful example too, because yoga's very competitive. It's a space where, if you're doing the eagle pose and you can put your feet off the ground, you're standing on your it's a competitive kind of state. Not in every yoga studio, obviously, but in some for sure. It's
Yeah.
fashionable, it's cool, it's groovy, it's definitely got a pursuing aspect to it in some arenas. And sometimes in meditation as well. I've had some patients who are like, I'm meditating. I've been told to meditate sort of 40 minutes twice a day. And
Yeah.
I mean, I have,
Exactly.
it's like, well, maybe don't. Like,
Yeah.
don't do that, you know? Um, I mean, I'm a great advocate for meditation, don't get me wrong, but it, there's a quality to meditation that is about letting go rather than about striving for a certain I guess, serenity. We can't really strive for serenity. Like our natural state of our mind is, in fact, relaxed. So
Mm.
often we don't have to do anything. It's, in fact, doing less is what is required rather than doing more. And when we're in a really significant state of burnout, I think it's a really important reassurance point for people of like, I tell a story in the book. It's one of my favourite stories. It was written about 100 years ago about an African tracker or a group of African trackers. And there was a colonialist needing to get to a certain part of Africa within 5 days to receive a shipment. And he needed the help of some trackers to help him get to this particular town by this certain date. And so there was only one of the trackers that could speak some English, and they had gone for one day, and that was fine. They'd gone for another day, and he kept pushing to try and get to this date. By the third day, the chief tracker asked all his fellow trackers to sit down and rest. And the colonialist said to them, like, what are you doing? We've got to get to this particular town by this certain day. And the head tracker said, we have gone too fast over the land. So we have to sit and wait for our spirits to catch up.
Uh,
And they sat there all day. And he was tearing his hair out. And they didn't move. And when I read that story, it really reminded me of me. Like it had this sort of sense of resonance. It's like I just simply did too much.
yeah.
And it wasn't my fault. It wasn't because I was a bad person. It wasn't because I was bad at business or good at business or anything like that. It wasn't actually about any of that. It was actually I just simply did too much for the body that I have, for the nervous system. And so I had to rest and wait for my spirit to catch up.
I love that. That's
Yeah,
such a great way to put it. No, it's so true, and like you said, it's not no one's fault. It's just the position we get ourselves into. But
mm,
until we do that, it's really hard to you hindering your ability to recharge, to be creative, to have all these other aspects that
yeah,
we keep us grounded. So it's Are you able to give a bit more? Give our listeners a bit more of an overview of your book. You've mentioned it a
yeah.
few times, but love to hear more about your book.
So the book is called The Wonder Within. And as a holistic GP, I really wanted to write about I guess the scientific understandings of the way that our body and our nervous system uh, interacts. And so there's a whole raft of different healing mechanisms within the body that is almost unbeknownst to us. And it's really about teaching people how powerful we are at supporting ourselves if we know how to utilize these particular tools and skills. And so I do it in three
Mm.
different ways. So the first stage is kind of laying the foundation of why it's so important, but also slightly historically about why we got into this particular state of medicine. Talk about reductionism and the way that we think about medicine, and almost this obsession about scientism as the only mechanism and method for human medicine, whereas really medicine is an art form based on science. It's not a science, it's an art.
Mm.
And it requires a love of humanity for which it to come alive. And the second part goes through the science of it so that it can help people to understand that the science comes from so many different elements, but it's often missed in the day-to-day practice of medicine. So when we look at biology, chemistry, quantum physics, ecology, when we look at the science of the placebo and the nocebo and the wisdom, of the way that we interrelate as a whole, the relationship of the heart to the gut, to the brain, to the social nervous system. These are all elements of research that has been burgeoning over the last couple of decades that really haven't found their way into a modern doctor's practice, yet are at the basis of our human health and so powerful to know. And then the third part is about the tools and the skills that are required, but also the pitfalls of some of those things. So how we as humans, particularly living in this Western culture, fall into these traps. So we spoke a little bit about shame before, or whitewashing everything. So sort of the bliss or sort of type of people that, everything is love and light and they can't allow any difficulties into their life, and those kind of those kind of peeps.
Yeah.
So, so we talk about all of those things, and it's done in the language of a clinician. So I've been a clinician for 25 years, and it really is like having about a 10-hour consultation with me. So some of my patients have said, I had a patient say the other day, I haven't seen you for 6 months because I don't need to, because I listen to you in my car. And so it's on Audible, and it's available on all of the online bookstores, and also through my website at theholisticgp.com.au. So
Okay, great. Yeah.
it's a lovely read. It's got lots of stories in it. It's got lots of examples of burnout, and it's a really lovely way of reframing anxiety and burnout as an opportunity to find a whole new way to embrace life and find a new version of aliveness that's much more sustainable.
Yeah, and I love that holistic approach, because I think there's a lot of books or information will be one or the other. It'll be one extreme or the other, but having that middle ground, I think that's always where the answer is. And I think so many people can get benefit from that. So so you're saying your website's the best place for people anyone listening? We'll put this in the notes as well, but
yes, lovely.
Is that the best place for them to go?
Yeah, and there's a couple of free meditations on there that are from the book, and a couple of other resources as well. And they can sign up. There's a free mini course they can sign up to, or finding your wholeness. So really about, I guess a lot of people still don't really understand that kind of concept of wholeness, because, as patients, we're often, everything's kind of been fragmented. And so it's really important to actually understand the basis of how we interconnect. And it can be a powerful shift in understanding our own empowerment, when it comes to health, even if it's not just mental health, so physical health as well. It's super important.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, well, thank you so much again for sharing that and everything. I have so many more topics and things I'd love to talk to you about. I just realised we've been going for quite a while, but I have to do a round two. But I really love this conversation. So we finish every episode with 5 closing questions. So these can be sort of whatever comes to mind.
Great.
The first one being, what is the best childhood memory that comes to mind for you?
Oh, goodness. Probably the best one. I was thinking about it this morning, actually. Like, I grew up in Sydney, And I grew up in a place called Belrose. So we lived actually on the back of a vast, what felt like when I was 5 years old, just a vast wilderness of forest. And all the kids from the street, I was one of the youngest ones, we would go out for the whole day. I remember coming back at like 6 o'clock, feeling like I'd just lived an entire year in that forest. And I just felt like I'd been taken on an adventure by these older kids, and yeah, it's probably one of my fondest
I love
memories.
that. And that's such a great example with what we talked about today as well, with just being distracted all the time, having screens, especially
Mm,
kids now, just being out exploring, being in nature, just having
exploring.
that experience. It's so important. What do you think is the biggest burden currently on mental health in society?
Probably our internal pressure. The
Yeah.
internal pressure we put on ourselves.
Yeah.
I think we're highly pressurized. We're in a pressure cooker of our own making. So it's often the prison. It's the invisible prison of our own making.
Mm. And yeah, I guess we talked about that quite a lot as well. And yeah, it's a big issue. Yeah, something
Yeah.
that's not
I could
going away
literally
anytime
do a
soon.
whole podcast on that one, Nick. That was a hard one to kind of sum up, but oh,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
There's so many different influencing factors on mental health. I think my only positive on that is that this could be a really good opportunity for change. You know, when we
Yeah.
look at the statistics on children's anxiety, is that like at least it could be a really truly good opportunity to change education systems,
Hmm.
social systems, even legal systems, everything that kind of, um, is really broken. So,
Yep.
yeah.
Agree. Well, I'll have to schedule a separate podcast just to talk about that topic with you. What would you say is your personal definition of happiness?
Oh, so there's a place in Victoria called Wilson's Promontory, and every time I drive, so it's this vast national park for anyone that hasn't been there, and it has about a 40 kilometre drive in to where you camp. And about halfway through that 40 kilometres, about 20 kilometres in, you come up to this peak of the road, and you look out over about 3 different white sand beaches, and you see the tip of the promontory. And every time I reach that peak, my soul just I'm not sure what it does, but I think it either breathes out or it starts singing. Something happens and I smile and I go, oh my God, I just love this place.
Yeah, I
That's
love
my
that.
best feeling.
And it is such a beautiful part of the world.
It's
Yeah, I love that one.
amazing. Oh, don't tell anyone. I wish I hadn't have said
Yeah,
it.
exactly. Keep it a secret. Yeah, keep it quiet.
Absolutely.
I
Yeah,
won't tell
it's only
anyone
for
else.
me. It's only my
Yeah.
soul that sings like that.
What are you most afraid of?
Oh, good question. Probably, it's probably about, this kind of occurred in the last couple of days, so I'm again on another precipice. That's the beautiful thing about being, taking chances and stuff. And I can feel this desire to kind of, I think, let medicine go. And I think I'm most afraid of not doing that. Said it out
That's
loud.
great. Yeah, I love that. That's such a yeah, and that takes courage to even say
Yeah.
those things. So that's an amazing one. Love
Mm.
that. Thank you for sharing that. And final one, what are you most proud of?
My book. I mean, apart from having 2 children and a beautiful, happy marriage where we're just about to celebrate 20 years, which I'm super proud of my
Amazing.
marriage, and I'm super proud of my children, and I'm super proud of our parenting, but I'm super proud of the book, The Wonder Within.
Well,
So
thank you so
I
much.
cheated there. There was 3.
You can have three. You can have
Okay.
three on that one. But yeah, I really appreciate you sharing all of this, and anyone listening, make sure to check out the book. And again, yeah, I think we could have chatted for another hour or two. Love everything
Awesome.
you're doing, and yeah, really appreciate you making the time.
Thanks so much, Nick. It was lovely.
Thank you, Dr. Michelle Woodhouse, for joining me today and offering your insights. And thank you for listening. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the episode and any suggestions for topics you'd like to hear about. Feel free to leave a comment or send a DM. Your feedback is always appreciated. Please don't forget to click the subscribe button, leave a like or comment, share with your friends, and follow me on Instagram. It really makes a difference. Thank you so much.